trained dogs were able to sniff out COVID-19 infections with 94% accuracy. Study.
Here's a summary of the article.
Now, according to German researchers, trained dogs can sniff out coronavirus infections. A new study, which was piloted by the University of Veterinary Medicine Hanover, the Hanover Medical School and the German Armed Forces, found that, if properly trained, dogs were able to discriminate between human saliva samples infected with SARS-CoV-2 and non-infected samples with a 94% success rate overall. To conduct the study, researchers trained 8 dogs from Germany's armed forces for 1 week. The trained dogs sniffed the saliva of more than 1,000 people that were either healthy or infected with the virus. Samples infected with COVID-19 were distributed at random, and neither the dog handlers nor the researchers on site knew which ones were positive. While more research is still needed, von Kerkritz-Blickweed says the next step is to train dogs to differentiate COVID-19 samples from other diseases like influenza. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, while dogs can get infected with COVID-19, there is no evidence that animals play a significant role in spreading the virus.
This post received a score of 69,000, with an upvote ratio of 93%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
Are they sniffing out COVID, or are they sniffing out that people are sick? It doesn't look their test group included people who had other conditions.
Greater than while more research is still needed, von Kerkritz-Blickweed says the next step is to train dogs to differentiate COVID-19 samples from other diseases like influenza.
If they can detect T-800s coming into the human refugee bunkers, then I'm sure they can bust COVID too. Only question is whether they are effective against asymptomatic people or only those who are more seriously affected.
Hey man, you got warned last week about this. You can't talk about the T-800s until August 2020. It's in the Time Travel Guidelines page 5.
I don't think he got the warning until next week.
Don't worry, he'll get it yesterday. I will have been sure of it.
H2G2, Douglas Adams.
Philip J. Fry would like a word with you. We need them at airports more than the drug dogs right now.
I remember reading that most of the dogs in US airports are actually sniffing for bomb-making chemicals and not drugs.
It depends where in the airport you are at. At TSA, when going through security before departure, they are explosive-sniffing dogs. But at custom, when re-entering the country from overseas, they are drug-sniffing dogs. Then also, some airports let local police come walk around more or less anywhere passengers are, and those are almost always going to be drug-sniffing dogs, but I generally think of those as basically the cops trying to get funding for the area rather than actually protecting anyone.
You're right, I was referring to the dogs I always see walking around the people in line going through security, not customs on the way into the country.
I don't know the numbers, but I imagine that you are right as well. Customs will only be at the international airports, while TSA is at all but like 3 airports in the US. TSA is even at places like MSL, which gets only about 6,000 passengers per year, but connects into the domestic network through ATL. So I'm sure there must be more explosive dogs than drug dogs working in airports in the US, as you said.
The customs dogs I've run into while traveling were looking for large sums of cash, not drugs. That's why I only carry coins.
All right, boys. We found the cause of the coin shortage.
I smell death on you.
Great, now I'm going to be nervous every time my dog sniffs me.
That's actually a cliché with cancer. Some people notice dogs following them a lot, even before they knew they had cancer.
How many negative samples had BPL? Were they presented with the same negative sample that didn't have BPL? Were they presented at the same time in one of the 7 sniffing holes? How many of each sample were there? Does this mean there were additional options for the dog to select from regarding the same negative sample? All things that would bias this study quite a bit, and we aren't told the numbers methods on any of it. Since all the positive samples had BPL and only some of the negative samples did, then perhaps the dogs aren't detecting the presence of COVID, but the presence of BPL. 5. The inactivation process for positive samples with BPL involve a number of procedures that the negative samples do not undergo. Rather than detecting the presence of COVID, perhaps the dogs are detecting the presence of samples kept at 4 CVS, the negative samples that were not, or perhaps they are detecting the sodium bicarbonate added to the positive samples that were not added to the negative samples. While the number of samples prepared was 10,388 sample presentations, samples from only 7 infected patients and 7 non-infected patients were used. Samples from the same patients were reused multiple times for all of these sample presentations.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.